Last time on Diamondbolt Z, our hero looked at some of the best villains of all time and decided that Thanos was the single undisputed greatest villain of all time ever. Probably. This time though, we're doing the importance of a good villain too. The importance of a good hero. Let's go, baby. In said video, I talked about how it was okay if a villain was just meh, because that can still make for an interesting story because the plot isn't entirely reliant on the villain. But unfortunately, this kinda can't work in the reverse because a very large majority of stories do in fact depend on the hero to carry the plot. Protagonist is so important because we're more or less going to see the entire story from their perspective. And just like a bad teacher in a subject you really like, even if the information around it is really interesting, if the person presenting it to me is a fucking idiot, then I'm going to have a bad time. First and foremost, I should want to like the protagonist. They should have redeeming qualities. Maybe they're funny, or charming, or have a kind heart. Or maybe they're boring, and bland, and they should be someone that we have a reason to root for. A story has lost me when I'm spending the entire time waiting for the main character to get viciously murdered. Especially when it's a kid's show and I have no idea what I'm expecting. Pepper, you slut! And, to some extent, they should be relatable. If the viewer can form a connection with the protagonist, then they can eventually grow to enjoy spending time with them. This comes fairly easy if the audience can see a part of themselves in the hero, like a weakness or an insecurity or a flaw. But I'll get back to that later. This comes easy for mediums like video games, which have managed to make some of the most likable and interesting protagonists, even if they don't say a whole word throughout the entire game. Hey, better than this anyway. Shut the fuck! There's way more of a personal connection to the character because, well, you're playing as them, you dummy. Because of this, we spend the entire story wanting them to succeed. But it can be difficult to create a hero that we actually care about. The results of which many of us have, tragically experienced. A hero should stand out. Okay, maybe not that much. They should be different from the supporting cast. Can we get a quick rip for any heroes that are overshadowed by the side characters? And their actions should affect the direction of the story. We get to experience the journey with them, and we get to know them as people. And you know what's great? Character development. A character having clear goals and motivations and changing over time as they achieve them. There are few things as satisfying as seeing a character actually achieving their original goal on purpose, no matter how long it takes. One day, One Piece. One day. Not all protagonists are your traditional heroes with a heart of gold and billowing cape. Sometimes the protagonist can be a shitty and really evil person, like the bride from Kill Bill or Kratos in God of War. They're generally terrible, violent people who are very fond of decapitating everything in sight, oh my god, but they're still the protagonists. And the audience is given a reason to root for their revenge-filled bloodbath because we're shown the events that make them who they are. Their tragic backstory that triggered the journey that they're on. A bad example of this is Batman, who I'm really not too sure in his origin story. I think they need to put in a couple thousand more movies. They may not necessarily be good people, but they're still the hero of the story. But their alignment with the traditional word hero depends entirely on whether what they think they're doing is right. So when Liam Neeson shoots the shit out of a bunch of random guys, it's totally okay because he's doing it for his daughter. Aww. These protagonists don't fit the general bill of being the righteous and virtuous heroes to look up to. They're flawed and damaged people who constantly push the boundaries between what is right and wrong, which makes the story that we follow them through just that much more interesting. Mainly because they kill a lot more people. It's all about the hero's journey. What trials the protagonist undergoes before they find someone's ass to kick. Luke Skywalker, perhaps one of the most iconic main characters of all time, has what is now considered the generic hero's journey. Some random dude thrust into greatness, being told of an important quest, given special powers and abilities before going off to fight some spooky evil guy. If you compare him from the very beginning of his quest and his final appearance in The Last Jedi, you can see how much the character has changed. Like how the original Luke didn't drink titty milk. In contrast is the protagonist of the new Star Wars movies, Rey, who is a bit of a controversial character, hated by both people and gremlins who happen to own computers. We see Luke training and struggling to master the Force and getting abused by a hairy green avocado, but with Rey, she just happens to have Force powers. Okay, and that's not to say that she didn't struggle throughout her journey, but in comparison to Luke, well, it's the same reason why people didn't like Korra as much as they did Aang. People like to see a protagonist that's earned their powers, not just being given it, you know, here you go, have fun. So, let's talk flaws. Ash Ketchum from the Pokemon anime is perhaps one of my least favorite protagonists in anything ever, and not just because he's an annoying piece of shit. The series' only real attempt to give him a weakness is to remember at the very last second that they're supposed to teach kids that sometimes you don't win, and so Ash is yet to actually win a single Pokemon League tournament. Wait, actually, it's been like 5 years since I've watched the Pokemon anime, back when like Brock was still a thing. Let me just check to see if Ash still hasn't won. Yep, still the same. After 19 seasons, totaling 930 episodes so far, Ash has still yet to win a Pokemon League. The problem with this is that, well, yes, it shows that Ash does have flaws, that being that his greatest enemy is and always will be the lack of imagination from the writers. He never grows as a character, he never adapts to overcome the challenge, he doesn't frickin' evolve Pikachu. I guess Ash is a bit of a unique case though, because unlike most protagonists, which gradually get better as time goes on, like you would imagine they should, Ash completely resets every single season as it suits the writers so that his god tier level Pikachu can lose to a frickin' baby wild Pokemon. What is this show? In contrast to Son Goku, the guy that every 10-year-old wanted to be, who was someone that we know is always gonna win, except that one time when Gohan did. But it was seeing how he managed to pull it off despite all the odds stacked against him that made it so fun to watch. Or read, actually, because the anime took like 20 decades for anything to actually happen. And admittedly, a lot of the time Goku's solution to winning fights was just to magically transform to some new and more powerful form. A staple of lazy stories where the only way a protagonist can win is if they unlock some ultra super mega mode. But hey, despite its laziness, it's still pretty satisfying. Not the best way to write a hero out of a situation, but hey, I still love watching it. It sounds weird saying this, but I love watching the hero get the absolute shit beaten out of him. Like, brought to the brink of death and absolutely curb-stomped by the villain. Yeah, it sounds kind of sociopathic when I say it like that. But it's because they're brought to their lowest point, beaten, battered, and broken, that their eventual triumph is all the more sweet as hell to watch. Hell yeah, rip his legs off! Flaws make a character far more complex. Like I said before, that connection with the protagonist comes far easier if you can find yourself relating to them. People make mistakes. And so can fictional characters. It happens. Is half of the universe getting wiped out Star-Lord's fault? Maybe. But what's important is that he learned from his mistake and won't do it again next time. A fantastic example of a flawed and broken character is from BoJack Horseman, a show that cannot be good for my mental health. The main character, BoJack Horseman, is probably one of the most terrible people ever put onto television. And yes, I mean worse than literal mass murderers and death gods. People who have seen the show know what I'm talking about. BoJack is a washed-up sitcom actor who, while a millionaire, leads a life of self-destruction and sabotage. And every single time he takes a step in the right direction, he takes another 50 back. He's funny and likable, but deep down, he's a pretty selfish and terrible person. But I can't really get into why without going into too much detail. But it's because he's such a flawed and relatable character that we as the audience keep rooting for him, even though anytime he does anything, he just fucks it right to the goddamn sun. His actions don't come out of nowhere. We know what he's like, and his constant downward spiral is completely expected. Not to sound like the edgy 14-year-old here, but like many others, and I hate to admit it, I can see a part of myself in BoJack. Never being happy despite his fame and fortune and the consistent damage he does to all of his close relationships. Despite all of his awful decisions, you can't bring yourself to hate him because you get him. And the heroes that you just get, no matter how fantastical their worlds or their abilities, are usually the best ones. That's why it's all about them flaws. So what then if you have a main character that's completely perfect in every single way? Well, these are called Mary Sues, or take your pick for the male equivalent. These are the protagonists that you unknowingly but totally intentionally wrote into all of your 5th grade Sonic the Hedgehog fanfictions. I always thought to myself, what's the point of having a character that's completely perfect in every single way? Where's the fun in that? So I carried the mindset that any characters like this were completely and utterly boring. But, as usual, authors that are way more creative than I am have proved me wrong. Now, some of my favorite characters are completely overpowered and entirely undefeatable, and they're all the better for it. One Punch Man, a show I am terrified to mention in the same video with Dragon Ball Z. They're both amazing, okay? No fighting, please. Sees its protagonist, Saitama, being literally the most overpowered thing ever. As should be evident by the title, he kills basically everything in one punch. So there's not really ever any real threat because you know Saitama is always gonna fist his way to victory. But what makes One Punch Man so damn good is the tone of the series. Yes, it still has its absolutely spectacular fight scenes and serious moments, but the way in which Saitama kills everyone is completely played for laughs. Now, take a series that does this, but is trying to be taken seriously. And... I still like Sal, though. Another example is the family-friendly anime No Game, No Life. I watch it for the plot. Our protagonists, Sora and Shiro, are transported into a world where everything is decided by games. And that's awfully convenient for them because they are like really freaking good at games. To the point where they never lose. And the audience is well aware of this because they're sure to let us know every 5 seconds. But the show is still fantastic. For the plot. It makes it seem like there are stakes because there might be that one time where they don't win, but no, they're gonna win. They're always gonna win. But it's still so entertaining to see just how they outsmart the crap out of their opponents. Mary Sue's? Maybe. But great protagonists? Absolutely. Hell, some of the most famous characters in pop culture are Mary Sue's or Gary Stu's or whatever. James Bond, Indiana Jones, Jesus. Yeah, they're pretty much flawless in every single way and always accomplish the impossible and bang all the women on the entire goddamn planet and somehow survive an atomic explosion inside a refrigerator. But they're still great characters that we love to root for, and they play a big part in what makes their respective films so darn entertaining. There's something oddly satisfying about watching a protagonist that you know is always gonna win, triumphing over every single person that challenges them. And that's because, as I said, it's how they manage to defeat them that makes it so fun to watch. If they just killed them in the exact same way every single time, Saitama doesn't count, shut up, then, I mean, what would be the point? And then, on the complete opposite of the spectrum, are characters that are just way too flawed. As in, they completely suck at everything. Sometimes this is played for laughs, and it can be pretty funny to have a completely incapable protagonist while everyone around him is normal. Other times, though... Shinji Ikari. Let's talk Shinji Ikari. I like Shinji. I really do. As a character, he makes complete and utter sense to me, and I am in no way trying to criticize the writers of Evangelion for making him the annoying, whiny, irritating mess that he is. But he makes sense. Much like BoJack, Evangelion is very apparent as to why the main character is so fucked up. No, that scene. And to be fair, if I was 14 and suddenly asked to pilot a giant death robot by my asshole neglecting father to fight against a bunch of evil space triangles, then yeah, I'd probably be this much of a bitch as well. This is the price that must be paid for there to be such a realistic and honest portrayal of a character. For the love of God, stop crying! I'd argue that Shinji made Evangelion difficult to watch, but that couldn't be any further from the truth. It's because of the way that Shinji's character is, and the way that the terrifying, messed up world of Evangelion is presented to us through his eyes, that it's made so much more interesting through its broken protagonist. At face value, I want to punch him in the face, but Shinji's pathetic, desperate nature is what makes Evangelion so... Evangelion. It's really awesome to me that beneath all of the fictional things that I'll never be able to have, like the amazing powers, the burning desire to go up against even the most terrifying of evil, or the ability to find love, that I can still find myself relating to these characters. Because deep down, they're still people. People who have to overcome their own goals, obstacles, and demons. Whether metaphorically or very, very literally. So finally, let's take a look at one of the most iconic heroes of all time. Spider-Man. And no, not just because of the game that just came out, okay? I'm not sponsored by Sony. Despite the many adaptations of the Spider-Man story, one of the things I've always appreciated about it is his alter ego, Peter Parker. And how he has to manage his pretty crappy everyday life while secretly balancing the responsibility of being a hero. Because with great power comes great responsibility. Peter's life kinda sucks, and despite the awesome spider powers, he's constantly surrounded by tragedy. Like having his best cartoon cancelled prematurely. Thanks, Disney. We get to see Peter mourn and grieve and go through heartbreak.
Pizza time.
You're late. I'm not paying for those.
Pizza time.
All the while having to fight all of these spectacular bad guys, but not always winning. It's what makes him so human. There's this contrast between his two completely different lives which have their own obstacles and problems. The benefit of having characters with these alter egos is that you get to have both sides. The more relatable human side where you get to deal with things that the average viewer would be dealing with. And then there's the crazy and more exciting life he leads as Spider-Man where he has to go up against all of these lunatics. There's a lot of source material to choose from, but I'd say that Spider-Man is probably one of the most relatable characters ever written. And the same goes for a lot of superheroes who have that whole secret identity thing. We've had a lot of iconic and memorable protagonists, and some pretty bland and crappy ones. But unlike villains, the quality of the story is much more reliant on how likable the protagonist is. Thank you so much for checking out my uneducated rant about Ash Ketchum. Be sure to follow me on Twitter if you want some juicy memes, and be sure to share this video around and spread it like the goddamn plague. I know I usually don't do end cards like this, but I just wanted to give you all a massive thank you for all the support and kindness on that insecurities video I did. That was a pretty big, emotional video for me, and I was very worried about, releasing that, and I don't know why I was now looking back on it. And I said to myself, if I could help even one person with that video, then all of the work I put into it would have been worth it. So thank you guys so much for that. I may have some more videos like that in store in the future. I have plenty of video ideas that I really want to make at the moment, and I cannot wait to show you guys. So I'll see you next time.